Hi, everybody. Sorry, Zoom was crazy this morning. Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Sorry, I'm a little late. Zoom would not let me log in. All right, everybody. Why isn't my video working? There we go. All right, we're going to wait a couple seconds for a few more peeps. Okay. Did Zoom give anybody else a problem or just me? Anyone?
Just
Anyone?
you. Nah, it was fine.
Really? Okay, just me. Lucky me. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about last week's assignment. So week 5, you had the first part of your 3-part research assignment, which is the majority of your grade. Some of you didn't hand it in, don't ask me why, but it's this. If you zero out on this project, I don't know that you can pass the grade because it's 35% of your grade. So it was super important that you did it. Even if you don't get graded, I'm going to tell you that you probably should do it anyway for the second part of your assignment, which we're going to talk about. But I'm looking to see, Lena's not here. Adrian, are you here?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Okay, Adrian's here. And Hannah, are you here?
Yes.
Okay, so Lena, Hannah, and Adrian are the only 3 that got the citation right, which is crazy because we talked about APA citation, which is called hanging. So in order to get full points, because this is an American Psychiatric Association project, you have to have the correct citation. So Lena, Hannah, and Adrian were the only 3 out of the whole class that got their citation right. So I cannot impress upon you enough how you have to do the citation correctly. the first line is not indented and the subsequent lines are indented. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Um, for the citation, it was on the website, and during the last Zoom meeting, I thought that's how y'all want us to do it.
No, it says APA citation on there. The librarian talked about it. I talked about it extensively, that it has to be done in APA citation. So I'm not sure where you got that idea, Charles, but it was said over and over and over and over again. And it probably was written on the top of the form. I can't be 100% sure, but where it says citation, it probably says that it has to be in APA format. I can't look at it right now, but I would venture to guess that it says that on the directions. Now,
Sir, I have a quick question before we
yes,
move on.
sure.
I copied the APA citation right from my article, but it still was wrong somehow. If you could maybe like send me a correct version of it, because I have no idea what I did wrong.
If yours wasn't right, it means it wasn't following hanging. It wasn't like this. Now, a lot of people just copy, and you know that when you just copy and paste, it's going to go in whatever format you have set up for your computer. So your computer is going to left orient, for lack of a better word. So everything went to the left. You have to make the effort to make sure that it has the indent, so it is the correct format.
Gotcha. I forgot to do that. Okay.
Right. So it definitely could have been the correct format on the article, but when you copied it, it might not have copied over. But I don't know that all the articles were in that format. I don't know what the citation looked like on your article, because I don't go back to your article. I just know that for this project, it needs to have the correct APA format. So you have to make sure you do that. The other thing is that there were some that were amazing, which like were crazy that you used the wrong format, because they would have gotten the 100% on it. There were a couple questions on the articles. For example, MOAS, did you go to Psych InfoNet to find that article? Because there was nothing psychological about the article you chose.
I searched it on the there's like a black box on the left, and then I searched something on it, and then it shows like all those articles that are like gray boxes, and then I clicked on one of those.
So did you go to Psych InfoNet? Did you logged into the library? You went into Psych InfoNet, you changed all those filters that we talked about for scholarly articles and stuff?
Yeah.
You did?
I think I'm not sure if like what do you mean, like
There's
filtering?
nothing, your article had nothing to do with psychology.
No, it was asking like scientific the question.
That's not what you were supposed to do. The directions were, and which we did with the librarian, then your homework was to do a Psych InfoNet article. APA, go to the library, log in through Psych Info and get an article, a scholarly article from Psych Info. And I don't think you did that.
I'm not sure. Like I just I just searched it. I just found an article and then I
Yeah,
Um,
no,
answered the
you
question.
have to use our database. That is what the homework and this project is. So you're gonna have to redo the article for yourself, not for credit. You're gonna have to redo this so that you can go through the next part too. So the other thing I just want to mention before I talk about the next part is you guys have to put this into your own words when you're writing it, or else you have to use citation. If not, it's plagiarism. It's considered plagiarism, which theoretically you could get a 0 for if you do not change the words. If I wrote to you that you got a super high plagiarism score, then that meant you were writing words from the article that, and to be honest with you, when you use words from a scholarly article, I am 100% sure, I'll say 99% sure, that you don't fully understand what they're saying. I'll give you an example. Hannah, can you tell me what the realism paradigm is? Hannah?
I explained it within the paragraph.
You
Of
use
what it
their
is.
words. You use their words from the article, not your words. Can you tell me what a realism paradigm is?
It's between two concepts of conservatism and something else.
That doesn't explain what it is, though. What is it actually? I'll give you another one. You put in a capital lettered word, manovas. Do you know what that is? Because I don't. What's a manovas? Do you know what that is, Hannah?
No, I'm not. I don't know. I don't understand what you're talking about.
This was in your paper. You referred to this manovas in your paper. Now, I don't know what it is. It wasn't explained, but it was put in there. So you cannot have things that you don't understand, that you don't explain for somebody like me to read your paper. Everything needs to be written so that I know that you understand it. And in turn, from you understanding, you're explaining it to me. So if you're using like initials for something, you need to spell out what the initials stand for, because I would have no way of knowing, nor would any other reader. So if I gave this article dissection worksheet to another professor to read, they have to understand it too. So you have to write it for a non-scientific, well, I shouldn't say non-scientific, a non-scholar. That's how you have to write this worksheet. Now, do you have any questions about what I've said so far before we go on to what's happening for week 10?
So one question about the worksheet. So citation just means that you hang the first sentence and then indent the rest. So that's APA citation.
APA is not the first line is hanging. APA citation is the second, third, and fourth line are hanging. The first line is a regular left, right. If you're looking at your paper, though, it's left. It's centered left, and then they're indented for the subsequent lines. That's APA citation.
Oh.
It should have been in your paperwork for the week. And we
And then
talked
the rest
about
of the
it.
lines are the same, or they're indent.
lines 2, 3, and 4 indented.
And
The
then-
first line is left oriented, all the way to the end of the page, left oriented, and then indented for lines 2, 3, 4, however many lines.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So let's look at week 10. I have opened up week 10 for you so that you have 5 weeks to finish this. So on week 10, you can see you'll be adding information to what you've learned in week 5 for your APA Psych Info assignment. Refer to module 5 if you need anything. Okay, so what you're going to do for week 5 is, for week 10, sorry, is you're going to take your week 5 research worksheet and make the changes that I suggested to it. So for some people who didn't do it or did it completely wrong, they should redo it. If you had pretty good but just needed to modify, like just the citation, then just modify the citation. You're going to pick a second article by going to the library and going to the Psych Info Net and picking out a second article. Your second article should have something in common with your first article. If you did your first article on music and how it affects depression in adults, then maybe you should pick music affecting depression in children. If you did, I'm trying to think of some of your articles. So if you did social media and how it affects the self-esteem in women, then maybe you should do social media and the self-esteem effects on men. You can find something in common with your first article, or it could be in contrast, but it has to have something that binds and ties the articles together. So if you did music and depression for adults, you might do exercise for depression for adults. So that depression in adults is the tie that binds them together. You could find an article that shows, let's say the article you did showed that music helps adults with depression. You could probably find an article that said musical doesn't help. You might find the opposite, but again, it has it in common. So for week 10, I suggest that you do another literature review worksheet, because for week 2, you're actually writing the paper, the actual paper. So there's steps here we're going to go through. We'll do this on, maybe we'll do these on week 9. There's maybe 8. I don't want to do it too late. All right, maybe we'll go over this stuff on week 8. In the meantime, what I need you to do is be finding your second article and be writing your second article literature review worksheet. And then you're going to be doing a paper, and we're going to go through exactly what the paper is going to look like, what it has to look like, and you're going to hand that in for your week 10 assignment. And basically your paper is just going to be the combination of the two worksheets. That's why the worksheets help you, because you don't want to have to write a whole nother paper. You're going to have all the information you need from the paper from your two literature review worksheets. What questions do you have about this? Let's do week 10.
I don't have no questions, but just to confirm, so you pick another article similar to the first, right? And then-
Similar, contrasting, maybe different, but having something to combine.
To do with it, right? And then you do another article dissection, and then you do the paper, but we'll talk about it on week 8.
Yeah, we're going to talk about, I'm going to write it in my notes so we go over paper on week 8, so it still gives you like a couple weeks. I'm going to show you what the paper looks like in week 8. So all you have to really worry about right now is doing the second article dissection worksheet. And I don't see your second article dissection. I don't grade that. You do that for yourself to make it easier to write the paper, because your paper is going to be written very similar to this article dissection worksheet. It's going to talk about who's involved, the method, the results, and your, so what factor. It's written the same way as the article dissection worksheet, but it has to be written more like a paper. But it makes it
Okay,
much
I got it.
easier for you.
All right.
Questions?
One question about the worksheet about even though out of the 3 points I only got half, even though the only thing that was wrong was the citation, because I didn't do it because I
No, that's not true. You did not do a psychology article. I gave you credit for actually just doing the worksheet because the article wasn't right. So your citation was wrong in addition to the entire thing being wrong because it wasn't the correct article. You have to use Psych Info and pick an article that has to do with a scholarly article written in a psychology journal.
Oh, I thought that the questions like that were there, I just answer and use the article to.
That's what the librarian taught us. So go back to the video. The video's on week 5. Watch how she went into Psych Info Net, do it through the library, and get a psychology article. You're going to need now 2 because your first one was not a Psych Info Net
I have a
article.
question. I have a question.
Yes.
So it's basically like a peer review article. Is that the same thing as what you're talking about?
Yeah, you're going in for another peer journal article, scholarly article in a peer-reviewed journal. That's what you guys were going into, peer-reviewed journals. It's a scholarly article. You're doing it the same way you did it with the librarian on week 5. You're going to have to get a second article through Psych Info. Any other questions? That's not due to week 10, which is after our Easter break. So you have like theoretically an extra week because week 10 on the calendar is I think the Easter break. So it's actually week 11 on the calendar, but week 10 for here. So you really have 6 weeks to get this done. So you guys were able to write up a research worksheet in 1 week's time. You should have no problem doing that again 1 week's time. And then you have 5 weeks to write it into a paper using the same information. It's not hard. We'll go over that stuff week 8. The key is that you get the second article, write up that second research worksheet for yourself. Make sure that you use the correct APA format, and you should be A-okay. We'll talk about it again week 8 unless you have any other questions now.
So it's a 3-page paper?
Yeah, it's not a lot.
Yeah, that's not bad.
No, and you have all the information. You don't need to go anywhere else. You're using your research worksheet. So you're not looking things up and you're not researching. It's not, the research is in the research worksheet. You're not using anything else. So it's not hard.
Yeah.
Not bad at all. Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, let's go to week 6. I love week 6. It's biopsychology. Biopsychology is basically neuroscience. This is what we're doing, neuroscience this week. We're studying the brain and the nervous system. So this is like a biology class, but how biology affects psychology, because all biology affects psychology. Remember, we talked about the fact that the clothes that you're wearing is psychology, and the way you think is, psychology, and how much pain you feel. That's biology, right? It's psychology. So we're going to talk about how biology affects psychology, because every thought you have starts biologically and affects your behavior. That's what this chapter is about. So we're going to talk about that. So I just want to show you what's due this week before we start jumping into the meat of the chapter. So you have your study plan, you have your quiz, and then you have a discussion post. I can't understand how come people still don't get all the parts of the discussion posts done. But just like all the other discussion posts, this is a discussion post where you are writing a discussion post about something, an activity that you did today. And then you're going to talk about 5 parts of the brain that helped you do that activity. Okay, so your discussion post, the first part is thinking about an activity. You went to the gym, you did some homework, you did the dishes, and then you're going to talk about 5 parts of the brain and how they were integral to that activity. Then you're going to write, if you were a psychologist or a neuroscientist interested in learning about one of those brain parts, 1, what method would you use to learn more about the brain? And we're going to talk about all these different methods, and you're going to learn about different methods that we study the brain. Then you're going to write on 2 classmates' posts, and then you're going to return to your original post, which is why I say to do it on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, so that people have time to comment on your posts. So Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday works, because Tuesday you write it, by Thursday you can write on other people's posts, and by Saturday somebody has probably commented on your post. So you're going to go back to your original post and you're going to comment on what somebody wrote about what you said. In order to get all 40 points, you have to complete all of these parts. 4 parts involved. Your own post, 2 posts on other people, and coming back to your own post. Super easy to get all points because it's your opinion. When you're writing on other people's class posts, you're writing about your opinion on it. So it's not wrong as long as you do it. That's why it's crazy that you don't do it. So, questions? Everybody good? Yes. Go ahead.
So I just take an article from the Psych info, and then I use that for the answer all the questions and the citation and all of those.
We're back talking about the paper, not this chapter, right?
Yeah, for the paper, and then the using that.
For the paper, you have to go through the library to Psych InfoNet. You have to pick, now you're going to pick out 2 articles because the first one doesn't count for you. So you need to find 2 articles on Psych InfoNet and write 2 research worksheets on them.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Are we ready to jump into biology and behavior? Yes. Everyone? Okay, good. Oh, Lena, you joined us. Lena, you were one of the very few people who got the citation right. So props to you. I don't know when you joined us, but props for that, Lena.
Oh, thank you. It's available to anyone really, as long as you normally, a lot of us probably are used to getting the MLA citation. If you just scroll to maybe a different part, you'll see the APA citation.
Yep.
Available on any Middlesex library thing.
And I also explained to them that often when you cut and paste, it becomes the left oriented. So you have to make sure it's APA.
Oh yeah, I don't even blame people for that. It took me like 2 years to realize how to actually indentate that properly.
Yep.
Struggled with that forever. I learned how, then forgot, learned how, then forgot, and it finally stuck after like 2 years.
Well, hopefully it won't take 2 years here. We don't want anybody to lose points. Okay, guys, let's jump into biology and behavior. So this chapter is a biological chapter, but even though it's biology, it's biopsychology because we're in psychology class. So we're going to talk about how everything biologically affects us psychology. So we're talking about biological psychology is how the brain and other biological systems of our body influence human behavior. So back in the 1800s, the first guy who was studying anything to do with biology and psychology was a guy named Franz Joseph Gall. His last name was Gall. Franz Joseph Gall in the 1800s was in Germany. And he was wondering why people act the way that they do. And he thought that it had to do with the bumps on your head. Does anybody know what studying the bumps on your head is called? Anyone?
Neuroscience.
Say again?
Neuroscience.
No, it's called phrenology. Phrenology. Phrenology is when you study the bumps on your head. And so even though, do we think is it true? By studying the bumps on your head, can you talk about psychology?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Say again,
No.
Lena?
I said I don't think so. It's probably
You
one
don't
of
think
those
so?
stereotypical things.
Anybody believe that it is? Lena says no. Anybody think yes?
I think at most it just like tells you what the shape of their brain might look like at most.
So phrenology is not a science. It is not true. And it's not even really the shape of your brain. It just is what it is. Studying the bumps, feeling the bumps on your head is what's known as a pseudoscience. It seems like science, but it's not. But we credit Gall and phrenology because it was the first time anybody tried to study the brain. So did you ever hear anybody say, you should get your head examined? Like, you're crazy, you should get your head examined? That's because of phrenology, because for a while in time, people were getting the bumps of their head examined, and somebody would go, oh, I feel a bump over here. You're very good at math. Or, oh, there's a bump over here. I think you're very emotional based on this bump on your head. So it was the first time, there was no science behind it, but it was the first time that somebody was really studying the brain. So we have to say, wow, in the 1800s in Germany, this was a leap in science. So after they realized that feeling the bumps on the head did not work, they had to figure out how they could study the brain. At the time, they really didn't have any way to image the brain. So the only way that they could see the brain was how? How could they see the brain?
Cutting your head open.
Yep. Cut that head right open. So that's what they did. They went into jails and they went into psych wards and they literally chopped the top of people's heads off. And there's a term for that. The term is called ablation. Ablation is when they cut the top of the heads off and then they would remove a part of their brain. And when the person couldn't walk anymore, they said, oh, that part of the brain has to do with their motor coordination. Or if person couldn't talk anymore, by taking out that part of the brain, they'd say, oh, that's a speech center. Or if somebody was very emotional or not emotional at all, they'd say, oh, that part of the brain has to do with emotions. So they would go into these centers, they'd cut off the top of their heads, they'd remove brain parts, and then they'd have all of these impaired people who couldn't do things because they were studying the brain. So I guess at the time, some activists said, you can't just incapacitate people for the rest of their lives in the name of science. That's just not okay. You have to figure out a way where it's temporary. And so they still chopped off the tops of their head. They just didn't remove the parts of their brain. They just electrically shocked it so it would get paralyzed for a little bit. And if you couldn't walk or you couldn't talk, then they were able to prove that that paralyzed part was responsible for what part of the body. And then eventually the electrical stimulation would wear off. So it didn't impair people permanently, except for the fact that they had the top of their head taken off, which is not good. So they had to, scientists were continually working to figure out how to see and work with parts of the brain without being intrusive, without cutting off tops of their brain. So it wasn't until 1929, so think about the hundreds of years went by. And in 1929, the Hans Berger invented the first way to see the part of the brain without being invasive. In 1929, Hans Berger invented what is known as the EEG. Who knows what EEG stands for? Come on, peeps. You've heard this before. Nobody knows what the EEG stands for.
Something to do with electricity?
It does. It does have to do with electricity.
It's like electroencephalogram or something like that. I can never say it right.
Not bad. Good. It's electroencephalograph. Electroencephalograph. Now the encephalo, electric, Lena, encephalo, and the word encephalo is the Greek word for brain, encephalo. And graph means that they were able to document it, right? Electroencephalograph. So it was the first time that anybody was able to see something that went on with the brain. So they put electrodes, and they still use it today. They 100% use EEGs mainly for one reason. Who knows what the reason that they use EEGs for?
Is it to scan your heart?
No, only
Is
your brain.
Oh,
Only
okay.
your brain.
Brain waves, like to measure
Why?
them?
But why would they use
Oh.
it now? Because now we have
To see if there's an issue or something, maybe?
what issue? The answer is
Oh.
yes. What issue? What issue would show up in brain waves?
If your brain, if parts of your brain are having issues communicating with other parts of your brain, because they
No,
work off,
we would use many other, Jonathan, we would use other more intense kind of CAT scans and whatnot to see communication. And EEG does something very specific. So you've got some regular brain waves, okay? When you're busy, your brain waves are alpha and beta. We can talk about all the different brain waves, okay? Now, if this is your normal brain wave and you see something that goes like this, what do you think that peak is for? What might we see on an EEG if you have a what? Starts with an S.
Stroke,
Not stroke,
spasm,
not a spasm. It looks like a spasm if you're looking at it. What is it?
A spike.
Not
Spike.
a spike. I'm not playing hangman with any of you. Seizure. Seizure. EEGs are showing us seizure activity in the brain. A seizure happens in the brain. So if you're looking at regular brain waves and you see a spike, most likely that means that your brain is having a seizure. You can have seizures and not even know you're having seizures. Most people who have seizures know they have seizures, but there are they're called spatial seizures, where people can like zone out, and it actually can be caused by the brain, not because you're daydreaming. So EEGs are still used today, even though they were the first in 1929, the first way we could see brain waves. They are still used today, but there are many other ways to see the brain. And we're going to have to speed this up a little bit because we have a lot to cover. So in the 1970s, neuroimaging started. The first way we saw the brain was with a CT scan, which is computed tomography. Computed tomography means you use what to see the brain? Computed tomography uses what to see the brain? Root word.
computer.
Thank you, Adrian. Computed tomography means you use a computer, which means that they do an X-ray through and around the head, and a computer enhances it. So it's the first time we actually got a picture of the brain in the 1970s, not that long ago. Then an MRI came out. Who knows what MRI stands for?
Oh, I forgot that.
MRI stand for?
Magnetic radiology?
Magnetic resonance imaging, which means we use what? First word.
Magnetism.
Magnets. So an MRI is when they use a magnetic field to make a three-dimensional model of the brain. The MRI was the first time we could actually see a model of the brain. Again, we're talking about the 1970s, not that long ago. So you could see the structure of the brain, but you could not see the activity of the brain. So something had to happen for us to be able to see the activity of the brain. And that's when nuclear medicine came about. The PET scan was the nuclear medicine that allowed us to see the function of the brain. PET scan stands for positron emission tomography, which means that subatomic particles are injected into your bloodstream. They go up to your brain, and then you will listen to music, or you will be asked a math question, or you might be listening to a foreign language, and the part of the brain that is being used lights up. So it was really amazing to be able to see the brain functioning without being having anything invasive. So they needed to get away from nuclear medicine, from injecting subatomic particles into the body. So the fMRI, it looks like this, an fMRI is a functional magnetic resonance imaging, came out in the 90s, that looked at the oxygen level. So nothing became injected anymore to your body. You were able to look using magnets. They're able to look at the activity level in your brain based on oxygen level with those tasks or with those activity. So since there's some super intense, very expensive brain scans that can happen that most insurance companies won't cover, but the moral of the story is that they can see everything down to a millisecond that goes on to your brain right now. But most of the time, the functional MRI is used because it's the most cost effective. All right, let's talk about the brain. The brain weighs about 3 pounds. It's the size of a grapefruit, and it sort of looks like tofu. The question is, does size matter in the brain? Does size matter?
No.
Anybody agree differently?
I say yes.
Okay. Anybody else? Come on, guys. What do you think? Yes or no? I can tell you turn on your cameras and I'll raise your hands, but.
Oh, I don't think it matters.
So I pose this to you. Is an elephant smarter than a human?
No.
No.
They're not. And so
No.
size does not matter. An elephant's brain is way bigger than a human's just because of the size of their body. So they are not smarter. So the answer is, does size matter? No, it does not matter when we talk about the brain. So we are going to start with the smallest part of our brain, and then we're going to go bigger. So the smallest part of your brain, but is very, very, very important to everything you do, is the part of the brain called the neurons. The neurons. So, we're going to learn about the neurons. Can you turn on your cameras for a second? Turn on your cameras.
My camera is very laggy, Professor.
Okay. Cameras. Gonna make you do a little physical activity this morning. Good to see your faces. Come on, the rest of you. Cameras on. So you have 85 billion neurons that run throughout your entire nervous system. And they're basically responsible for every single thing you do. Come on, cameras back on. So just like snowflakes, neurons are all different, except they have the same 4 parts. So I'm going to teach you a way to remember the 4 parts of the neuron. Everybody put out your left arm. That's your dendrites. Show me your dendrites. Left arm out, dendrites. Your body is the cell body. Your right arm is the axon, and your right hand is the axon terminal. So let me see your dendrites. Everybody show me your dendrites. Jake, you're giving me a look. I can see you. Where's your dendrites? Dendrites, Anthony. Cell body. You'll remember this. Cell body. Your axon, right arm, axon, right hand, axon terminal. Do it without me. Dendrites. Oh, I was doing it with you. Dendrites, cell body, axon, axon terminal. Okay, I'm going to write them down for you in that order. Your dendrites receive the information. Remember, these guys are responsible for everything that happens in your body. So it's important to know. And you might have heard this before in your biology class. Your dendrites receive the information from another neuron. The cell body just holds the information. Your axon carries the information away, and your axon terminal links with the other neuron. What part of the neuron does the axon terminal link to?
Dendrites.
Correct. So it's a big chain of information going from your body to other parts of action and happening. So it's responsible for everything that happens in your body. So again, no 2 neurons are alike, but they all have the same 4 parts. Now you guys have heard about that little space between neurons. It's called the synapse. I'm not going to go in through a whole biology lesson, but what's important to understand is that there are chemicals that affect behavior that help jump over that space between neurons. And those are called neurotransmitter chemicals. And these chemical messengers are very important because some of them you can't live without. There's a really important one called acetylcholine, which activates muscles. What's your heart? What's your heart?
A muscle.
A muscle. So if you don't have acetylcholine working, that neurotransmitter, you're not living. So neurotransmitters are super important because it activates the muscles. Your heart, walking, talking, all of that stuff is neurotransmitter chemicals. Some of those other ones, which you might have heard of, is have you guys heard of serotonin? What do you equate serotonin with?
Happiness.
With what?
Isn't it like happiness?
It could be. I mean, most
Sunlight.
people don't. It does have to do with mood, but most people think of serotonin with sleep. That's what most people associate it with. So serotonin does have to do with mood, but it controls your appetite and sleep. Does anybody know what endorphins are?
Endorphins are, I think it's energy boosting or mood boosting hormones.
So yes. So endorphins are released they're a neurotransmitter chemical that are released in response to pain. So you've heard the terminology runner's high. When somebody's running and all of a sudden they feel great. Nobody loves running, but all of a sudden you feel like a morphine, like a drug-like high from running. That's why people do acupuncture. Has anybody in this class done acupuncture?
I never have,
No? Anybody?
but I actually want to.
So
Tried
the
at least once.
concept is that you're getting these needles into your body, which normally wouldn't make you feel good, but because a neurotransmitter is released in response to these needles being put on your body, you feel really good. It makes you feel great. And that's all got to do with your brain, with the response from getting needles put into your body that make you feel good. So neurotransmitters change things. Now we'll talk about really quickly, just because caffeine's a big one that we talk about. Caffeine, everybody believes that caffeine actually gives you like energy, right? Do you believe that caffeine like perks you up and makes you feel like you have more energy?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
But that's not how caffeine works. Caffeine works with your neurotransmitter chemicals, sort of like a train gate of stopping things that slow you down. So when you talk about adding something to your body that would like change the behavior and add something, most of us think that when you have a cup of coffee, that it speeds up your body, that it adds something. That's called an agonist. When you stop something, it's called an antagonist. And caffeine is an antagonist. Caffeine, when you have coffee, tea, chocolate, all those things that you think give you a boost, they're not actually boosting. They're working in your brain to block the things that slow you down. So just a little tidbit about caffeine. When you're using caffeine to perk up, you're actually using caffeine to block the neurotransmitters that slow you down. So it's an antagonist. It stops something from happening, not adds something to you. So do you lose brain cells daily? If you drink, are you losing brain cells? Does everybody lose brain cells daily?
Yeah.
Yes,
Your brain
everybody
have a
loses.
certain amount, and then just
Depending on what
dwindles
you're
most of it.
doing, you lose more, right? But yes, you lose brain cells daily. But do you get new brain cells? Are they gone forever? And then you're always at a deficit?
No, they regenerate.
No, they don't.
Exactly.
They do?
Good job. Neurogenesis. Your brain cells daily regenerate. They regrow. Neurogenesis. Thank goodness. You have the production of new brain cells every day. Now, you've seen children that are born with brain damage, yet they're able to function 100%. Their brain is 100%, even though certain parts of their brains didn't form correctly. And the younger you are, the better your brain is for what's known as neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is when your brain modifies and reorganizes, and the earlier the better. And we'll talk when we get to the parts of the sides of the brain and stuff about how your brain redoes that. But
Miss, can you hold the board up again?
sure.
Thanks.
Neurogenesis is the reproduction of brain cells, and neuroplasticity is the way the brain modifies, the brain reorganizes, and the earlier, the better.
Thanks.
So, we went from microscopic neurons to something that you can see with the visible eye. A big bundle of neurons make up a nerve, and a nerve is visible to the eye. So nerves are just a bundle of neurons, and they have a white fatty layer around it called myelin, and that helps speeds up transmission. Your nerves make up the what? What do your nerves make up? A system of your body. What is it?
The nervous system.
Right. So you have a nervous system, and your nervous system is made up in two parts. And we'll start with the one that's the obvious, which is the one you've heard of, which is the central nervous system. Does anybody know what the two parts of the central nervous system are?
Your spinal cord.
Spinal cord and
Brain.
the brain, right? That's the two parts of your central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord. Good job. Okay. So most of us, when we talk about our nervous system, we talk about the central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord, but you actually have another part, which is equally important. And that is called the peripheral nervous system. And that's all the parts other than the brain and the spinal cord. Okay. So just like you have a computer, like that could be the brain. Let's use the analogy that your brain is the operating system of your computer, and everything that comes from your operating system. So let's say you have a desktop computer and your operating system is in a tower. All the cords that come from the tower are your spinal cord. So the peripheral nervous system, which the term in computer peripherals are everything but the main part of the computer. So your monitor, your keyboard, all that stuff are called peripherals in computer talk. That's the same in biopsychology. You have this peripheral nervous system that is everything but the brain and the spinal cord. So as part of the peripheral system, you have two systems called the somatic system and the autonomic system. Somatic and autonomic. Now, autonomic is automatic. The word is not automatic, but it is automatic. So autonomic are anything involuntary or automatically that you don't do. So for instance, when you eat a bagel, do you have to digest it? Do you say, okay, it's time to digest my bagel, or does it happen automatically? It happens automatically, right? So things like your heart rate and digestion and all of those things that happen automatically are part of your autonomic system. So if those things are automatic or involuntary, what would be somatic?
The conscious decisions.
Yeah, your voluntary behavior. So things like your skeletal muscles are part of your somatic system. Your sensory organs are part of the somatic system because you are trying to sense something. You are smelling, you are seeing, you are tasting. Those are part of the somatic. Now we're going to break down the autonomic just a little bit more, because you have two systems of the autonomic. You have sympathetic and parasympathetic. So this means you don't have control over it happening, but you're driving to Middlesex County College. You have maybe it's a final, maybe it's a very important test that you've been studying for, and somebody hits the back of your car while you're waiting to turn into the college. what might you do? Tell me
Get
what you
angry.
might do. Adrian,
First,
what
you
might
get
you do?
scared. You get scared first.
Okay, and then
Then
what
you
might
become
happen?
angry.
Angry. So you
Yeah.
might get out of the car and be like, what the hell? Blah, 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 you know, be screaming. Ladies, what might you do?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, you get into a car accident right in front of Middlesex County College. It's a day when you have your final. That is very important. And somebody hits the back of your car. What might you do?
Take a picture, send an email to my professor, and then call the police.
Okay, so you're very logical, but you're not being theoretically emotional. What might you be feeling? We said scared, angry.
Pissed.
Stress.
What'd you say, Jake?
Pissed.
Pissed. You might be so angry that you like punch their car. Ladies, what might happen? I'm somebody, when I get into an emotional state, even if I don't want to cry, I end up crying. No, this can't be happening. I have this final. I have to get an A to pass the class. So you don't have any control over it. Your sympathetic system kicks in. And your sympathetic system is ready for action, fight or flight. Your heart rate goes up. You're perspiring. Your breathing has changed. Everything, your blood pressure is up. Your body gets ready for action, fight or flight. If you're a cardiac personality and you're part of the sympathetic system, what might happen at that point? You could have a what?
Heart attack.
Right. Thank goodness we have what's known as the parasympathetic system that kicks in, and all of a sudden your body, where the sympathetic says fight or flight, your parasympathetic is rest and digest. It brings all the systems of your body down. It quiets the body down, and all of a sudden you can think clearly. So you might exchange information and be rational and say, oh, I can still make it to my test, or, oh, there's very, very little damage, or maybe even, okay, this isn't the worst thing because my car needed a repainting. So score for me that this person's going to pay for a repaint on my car. So good for me. So it's all how your brain changes and thinks about it in reaction. So the nervous system is not the only system of your body. You have other systems of your body that change behavior. The endocrine system are glands, not neurons, and they put hormones in the bloodstream. So your endocrine system, those hormones in your bloodstream are chemical messengers that affect behavior. So depending on your hormones, your behavior is changing. You also have different glands throughout your body. You have the pituitary gland. Who knows what the pituitary gland does? It's at the base of your brain and it's known as the master gland. What's it responsible for? Anyone?
Sweat?
No, pituitary gland is growth. So it regulates your growth. So some people have a hyper pituitary, which means that there's a lot. So you've seen that sixth grader that looks like a man with like facial hair and stuff, and they're huge. That's somebody who has hyper pituitary. And then, you know, the people that look super, super, super young, even though they're older, that might be hypo, that regulates your growth. You guys have the thyroid that regulates metabolism, your pancreas, which is blood sugar. Other than the sex hormones and all those glands, all those systems of your body that affect behavior. So let's now go on the outside of your brain. When you look at your brain, you see gray matter, and it looks like it is in two hemispheres, like you have two parts of your brain. So when you look at the brain on the outside, you're looking at the cerebrum. That's what it's called, the cerebrum. And you do have two separate hemispheres, and they have different activities. The right is responsible for stuff and the left is responsible. And right down the middle of your brain, you have this thick band of fibers, because what side of your body does the left side of your brain control?
The right side of your body.
Exactly. So the left side of your brain controls the right side of your body. The right side of your brain controls the left side of your body. And that happens because of the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is this band of fibers down the center of your brain that allows the two sides of your brain to communicate. Now, if you have severe seizures, you might have to have what's known as split brain surgery. And so a split brain surgery means they literally cut the corpus callosum. And when they cut the corpus callosum, the left side of the brain controls the left side of the body, the right side of the brain controls the right side of the body, and they don't speak. So if you were in a rehab and somebody had split brain surgery, they could literally be putting on their pants with their left side and be pulling down their pants with the right side, because they don't communicate. But through neuroplasticity, they do learn to communicate. The body learns to modify, and they learn to do things in conjunction, but it takes a while. The only real reason you would have this, it's called a hemispherectomy, where you would divide the parts of the brain, is if you have a really bad seizure disorder. That's what you would do that. Now let's talk, we don't have a lot more time, so it's super important for me to talk about the lobes of the brain, the different parts of the brain. But that gray wrinkly area that you see on the brain is super important, because 40% of neurons are in that outer layer of the brain, that wrinkly gray area. That is called your cerebral cortex. And it is very important to your brain, because 40% of all neurons are there, which means that 40% of everything you do happens in the cerebral cortex for your whole body.
Professor, I have a question.
Yes.
This is all in the study plan, right?
Yep. This will all be in, I mean, I might even be going a little bit more than your study plan. So, so your cerebral cortex is very important to your brain. And the more wrinkled and thick means that there's more neurons in there. So you're actually smarter. So they literally excised Einstein's body to examine his cerebral cortex, and they found that his was very thick and very wrinkly. So for instance, squirrels have very smooth brains. They're not considered to be smart, and their brains are very smooth. So we're going to talk about the lobes of the brain now. And you have 4 lobes, 4 types of lobes, but actually 5 lobes. So we're going to talk about the largest one first, and that is the frontal lobe. So if you took, almost where you see my part, if you took your fingers and went like this area in front, if we were in class, you'd be writing on shower caps on each other's heads, but we can't do that from home, which stinks. So this whole part of the front of your brain is called the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe, it is the largest lobe of your brain. The frontal lobe, it's the largest. And the thing that's really interesting about the frontal lobe is right across the top of the frontal lobe is something known as the motor cortex. the motor cortex is this band of tissues that directs all of your body movement. So if you have an injury to your frontal lobe, there's a very good chance you're going to be paralyzed. And sometimes when you're paralyzed, so for instance, Eric LeGrand or the old Superman, Christopher Reeve, they actually, even though there's a spinal cord injury, they try to zap, for lack of a better word, they electrocute the motor cortex to try and get the message to the limbs to get them to be used again. So this is very important, the motor cortex. That's the frontal lobe. Then you have 2 lobes on either side of your head right here. So what do you think they're responsible for? If they're right here, what are they responsible for?
The left and right side.
The left and right side are there. They're on the left and the right. What are they responsible for if they're right here? What do you think they're responsible for? Say it louder.
Motor skills.
No. Motor skills, I just said, is the motor cortex. These temporal lobes are right here. What are they responsible for?
Listening, hearing.
Hearing. Thank you. Temporal lobes. You have one on either side of your head, and they're responsible for hearing. In the way back of your head, back where your neck meets your head, is the lobe responsible for vision. Does anybody know what that's called?
Occipital.
Yes, good job. Occipital lobe. The occipital lobe is way at the back of your head where your neck meets your head. That's occipital lobe. It's responsible for vision. And then you have one more lobe that is in between the occipital and the frontal, in between the temporals, and that is called parietal. Parietal. And I call that one, my sing-songy way of remembering it is a receiving station for sensation. So all the senses go through parietal except for smell. Smell is in the frontal lobe by virtue of being right here. So smell is in the frontal lobe, but all the rest of them go through parietal. Okay. I'm going to skip over a little bit and just go to the brain stem. Your brain stem has vital life functions in it. It's very important for your hindbrain for life-sustaining processes. If you have an injury to your brain stem, your life will change. Your life-sustaining processes like breathing and heart rate and sleeping and coordination all go through the brainstem. You have a system of the brain known as the limbic system. So I'm just going to write down a few things that are super important that you will learn about in later chapters. The amygdala. Does anybody know what the amygdala is responsible for? Anyone? How about the hippocampus? Anybody know what either the amygdala or the hippocampus is responsible for in our brain?
I thought the hippocampus was responsible for a lot of our emotions.
For what?
Isn't it responsible for a lot of our emotions?
No, that's the
Because
opposite.
hippocampus does memory.
Yes, hippocampus is memory. Amygdala is emotion. Amygdala is responsible for our aggression, our emotions. We mostly think about the amygdala when we talk about fear. People that have active or inactive amygdalas. I'm sure there's a few people on this Zoom who love scary movies and love that feeling of having their amygdala activated versus somebody like me that hates that. I despise being scared. So I don't go to those movies. So the amygdala and the hippocampus are important parts of the brain. All right, questions. Anyone?
What was the definition you gave for cerebrum again?
For the cerebrum?
Yeah.
So the cerebrum is that what you see, the outside area of the brain that looks like it has two hemispheres. And that it actually, the word cerebrum is Latin for the word brain. So that's what you're looking at when you see a brain. That's called the cerebrum, and it looks like it has two hemispheres.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Any other questions?
No questions, Professor. Thank you.
Good. Everybody have a great week and do your discussion posts with all 4 parts, please.
Have a good week,
All right.
Professor.
Have a great week.
Thank you. Bye. All right, guys. Bye.